Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us for the third annual Intermodal Logistics Center Forum. We are in session 4 of this third annual forum conducted by webinar. I'm Rusty Anna Moser. I'm your moderator with the Florida Department of Transportation. These webinar sessions are designed to provide an opportunity for the private sector and public partners to hear from Florida experts about the opportunities in this growing field. Specifically, the agenda includes the application process for the ILC program, ILC development and site selection, where ILC will go in the future, and a question and answer session with prior year awardees. We have about 74 people registered for the webinar today. We welcome those of you who are new to these sessions, but we are glad that those of you came back who've been at the earlier ones. Let's talk for a moment about how the webinar works. Here are a few quick tips about your webinar control panel. You can click on the arrows on the left side of the panel to open or close it. You can view the presentation in full screen mode with the bottom button on the left side. This webinar is being recorded, which means that all audience members are muted. We'll show you where you can get the recording at the end of the webinar. You may communicate with us by using the question box. Please remember to click send if you want to send us a comment or a question, and we will take questions at the end of all three presentations. If you have more than one person at your location, please go ahead now and enter the number of people at your location in the question box. That gives us a better estimate of actually how many people are attending the webinar today, and we know we have a few locations where groups of people are sitting together. Thank you very much for that. Our presenters today are Jimmy McDonald, Jasmine Raffington, and Keith Robbins. Jimmy McDonald is a project manager with over 15 years of seaport, rail, ILC, and freight transportation planning experience. He has expertise in master planning, site planning, and preliminary design, funding scenarios, and regulatory planning and permitting for major transportation freight terminals. Jimmy has worked extensively with the Florida Department of Transportation in the development of our ILC program. Keith Robbins currently serves as one of 7 district freight coordinators for DOT, specifically in District 1, where he coordinates on matters of freight, acts as a resource for freight issues with other government organizations and the private sector, and assists in facilitating freight transportation investment decisions. Prior to this position, Keith served as Director of Business Development for U.S. Army accounts for the Boeing Company subsidiary Tapestry Solutions, and as the Director of Transformation and Integration for the Military Service Deployment and Distribution Command, where he was a senior consultant to the command group and staff. Prior to that, Keith served in the Army for 20 years as an Infantry and Transportation Corps officer in a variety of leadership and staff assignments. And finally, Jasmine Raffington serves as a Senior Policy Advisor in the Office of Assistant Secretary for Intermodal Systems Development, and as Manager of the Economic Development Transportation Fund and the Intermodal Logistics Center Infrastructure Support Program. Prior to joining DOT, she served as Chief Policy Analyst in the Governor's Office of Policy and Budget, Transportation and Economic Development, and Environmental Policy, serving Governor Scott, Christ, and Bush. So with that, let's start with our first speaker, Jimmy McDonald. Sorry, I almost called you by someone else's name. Wait, just one moment. I totally forgot. To start us off, we have an introductory message by the Assistant Secretary, Rich Bider.
Hello, and welcome to the third annual Intermodal Logistics Center Forum. Thank you for joining us this morning. My name is Richard Bider. I'm the Assistant Secretary for Intermodal Systems Development with the Florida Department of Transportation. The Intermodal Systems Development Offices include the Transportation Development Offices such as Policy and Systems Planning, Environmental and Transportation Statistics, and the Office of Freight, Logistics, and Passenger Operations, which houses aviation and spaceports, rail and motor carrier, seaports, and transit. The FLP office was created to act as a tool to better connect, develop, and implement a freight planning process that maximizes the use of existing facilities and integrates and coordinates the various modes of transportation, including the combined utilization of both government-owned and privately owned resources. The office coordinates between the modal offices to ensure that Florida's logistics infrastructure remains cutting edge and aware of transportation innovations. The ILCs are an important part of our logistics infrastructure, which will enable Florida to truly be a global hub for domestic and international trade. I hope you were able to join us this morning for the question and answer session with the previous awardees of the program. As they have already received grant funding, they were able to discuss what aspects of their project were eligible and why. Hopefully, this insight will help future applicants determine what makes an eligible project and will offer guidance on how the grant funds can benefit an operation. If you missed any of the previous sessions and would like to view them, they will be posted online on freightmovesflorida.com shortly. This session, Charting the Course for the Future, will offer information on potential rule changes and an interactive discussion on where the ILC program is headed. Now I'd like to turn the microphone over to your speakers, and thank you and enjoy the session.
Okay, now we'll introduce our first speaker, Jimmy McDonald.
Good afternoon, and thank you to all the attendees that have joined us either again or for the first time. We really appreciate y'all and the work that you've done as stakeholders to help this ILC program be successful. One of the things that I wanted to share with y'all today is the discussing the rule and the rulemaking process and where we're going from here. The rule was developed initially with help from stakeholders as yourself, or maybe some of the stakeholders that are participating today on this call, on this conference webinar. First of all, let me go through a few of the items that I'm going to discuss, kind of an overview of my presentation to you all. First of all, I'm going to talk about the enabling legislation. I'm going to talk also about rulemaking authority. I'm going to talk about the process. I'm going to talk about where you can find the rule if you're interested in reading it for yourself or studying it. I'm going to discuss the origins of the ILC rule, key points, the pros and cons for the rule, and also just give you opportunity for some questions and answers, which we will take at the end. But if you could just write down any questions you have during my presentation or share them with us, we will, at the end, answer those questions as best we can. So moving forward, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the enabling legislation. Title 22, Ports and Harbor, Chapter 311, Seaport Programs and Facilities, Florida Statute 311.101 was enacted in 2012. And as you've heard earlier, this is what initiated the ILC program. This legislation was put in place, and it allows for $5 million annually for roads, rail, and other means of conveyance to and from Florida seaports as seaports defined in Chapter 311.09. This legislation is important because it provides an avenue for the department to fund projects such as ILCs. And the department, through this legislation, was given the ability to develop a rule. The administrative rule is numbered 14-118 and was developed by the department and was effective as of May 16, 2013. Rulemaking authority is the legislative authority provided in statute to either a state agency or state rulemakers, and that authority allows them to go into administrative code and develop rules that can either identify the way that the statute itself is defined, or add to that definition with additional input. And some of that input can come from public hearings. So in 311-101-8, Florida statute states that the Department of Transportation was authorized to adopt rules to implement this section. So within the statute itself, it clearly dictates that the Department of Transportation is the rulemaking authority. To discuss rulemaking, the assigned program area drafts the rule, and in this case, the initial assigned program area was the Seaport office. This happened approximately 2.5 years ago. Seaport office was deemed the appropriate office at the time because there was no other office specifically associated with ILCs, and the Florida statute specifically defined ILCs as having a relationship with Florida Seaports. The Seaports and Waterways office was the initial developers. They used this DOT staff to kind of begin to draft a first copy of the rule based on previous examples of rules that have been developed and based on legislation, the initial ILC legislation, Seaport office legislation, and other documents that we use internally here. After that, we worked very closely with the Office of General Counsel here at the Department of Transportation. They reviewed the initial draft rule, made sure that it didn't have any vagueness or arbitrary language in it, and that it supported the legislation that it was implementing, and that it also didn't hinder it in any way or cause any legal ramifications to the department. The rulemaking continued here is just going to go into a little bit more detail about that process. The draft rule has been provided to the Governor's Office of Fiscal and Regulatory Reform. Report on the regulatory fees and economic impacts anticipated because of the rule were drafted by the Office of General Counsel and the program area itself, the Seaport office. Upon approval by the Secretary of the Department of Transportation, a notice of rule development was published and in the Florida Administrative Registry. A link is provided to view the draft rule and to allow for public comment and input. Any person may request a workshop, or a department also may elect to hold one. The workshops should be located to best accommodate that participant that has requested it or the affected persons, and they can also use video conferencing to accomplish this means. The workshops must have in attendance persons that are either responsible for the program or can answer appropriately the questions of the attendees or stakeholders that ask for this to be developed, this program to occur. And one more page quickly on rulemaking. Revisions to the rule are made until the final form is complete and agreed upon, and the final proposed rule is published in the Florida Administrative Registry. A rule hearing may be requested at that time, similar to the workshop I just previously described. The rule is reviewed by Joint Administrative Procedures Committee, JAPC. JAPC or a public comment, and any public comments may require changes to be made to the rule at that time. A minimum of 28 days, but no more than 90 days after the rule is published or changed, the rule is sent to the Department of State for adoption in the Florida Administrative Code and is effective 20 days after that. So now that I got through all the painful stuff that talks about the rule, but I thought it was important to explain that process so you understood exactly what we went through in developing a rule. It wasn't a small process by any means. It took some time, and it encouraged the input from the public and from stakeholders like yourself. It is not a complete, it's a fluid process. It's not a complete process. So now I want to, if you're interested and you don't have any clue what I'm talking about as far as the rule, I want to show you where you can find the rule. A good, easy way to do that is first to, the way I always do it is to first, you can Google the Florida Administrative Code, and you'll get the Administrative Code Registry website, which is https:// //www.flrules.org. And that gets you to the website that I'm showing on the screen here. And if it's too small, I apologize, but it should give you a general idea of where you should look on the page. If you look in the middle of the page, there's a full text search. And you just basically type in ILC there and make sure that you have the NF.A.R selected. That stands for Florida Administrative Registry. So if you select that, it should pull you up directly to where the ILC rule is located. And make certain that you search either for ILC or 14-118 under the Florida Administrative Registry, and you should be able to find it. Now, if for some reason you cannot find it that way or you're having difficulty, you can also go to the Freight Moves Florida website, which we've shown several times throughout this presentation. And under the Intermodal Logistics Center tab, on that page we have a link where you can download the rule. And a third way is, of course, you can email either Jasmine Raffington or myself or any of the other DOT folks that you've seen presenting during this webinar. And we'd be happy to give you a copy by email. So as you can see, the next slide just shows the search results that you should have received if you typed into that search, and that will pull up the rule that you can download in Word form. On to the next slide, key elements of the rule. Wanted to describe some of the important elements within the rule, just so that you, as you're going through it, you kind of understand what you're looking at, and that you're able to quickly understand it. It's important for applicants that we discussed yesterday that are going to be applying that they understand the rule, because it'll help you better understand the application process. And it also helps because if you have ideas or potential changes that you may want to recommend, you'll have a firm understanding of what exists today and whether or not what you're recommending is already there, or if you have a better idea that's something that we could consider. So some key elements. First of all, in 14-118-001, you have the purpose of the ILC program. It basically is going in and defining the purpose that over the course of this rulemaking process we felt was derived from statute and stakeholder input. So that's basically a general overview of the purpose of the program. Definitions are in -002 or .002, which gives you the definitions throughout the rule. It's basically verbiage and definitions. It helps you understand some of the legal words that are presented in there that may be more difficult. .003 describes eligibility, project eligibility, which is kind of where we used in the application process to help us review your applications for funding. Then in .004, this provides the application and award procedures. So that's just a general overview of what you'll find when you download or read the rule itself. The key components of the ILC grant application are derived from the rule and key elements listed above. So again, I can't say how important currently it is for you to understand the rule. It really helps kind of understand the intent of the legislation and the rulemaking process that went on in the beginning of this program, and also may, like I said, give you, spur some ideas to make this program better, which we are constantly seeking to do, and that you could pass that along to us. So on the next slide, I'm going to briefly describe the origins of the rule. The Seaport office staff, along with General Counsel, worked together, as I explained before, to author the rule and to meet intentions of the Florida statute. The Seaport office manager sought the counsel of national consultants, industry leaders, to help guide the development of the rule language. And FDOT had 2 public administrative hearings in District 4 and Central Office to include public comments into the rule development. So you can see there was opportunity that was presented to the public, to the stakeholders in the development of this program, and that opportunity continues to exist today. Some pros and cons to administrative rule. These are just ideas that I came up with to share with you all, and you may have some more of your own, especially if you've been involved in the process from the stakeholder side. Some pros, it provides guidance, definitions, and parameters to frame the program. It gives legal precedence in decision making, and it provides a baseline for project eligibility. So we use this tool constructively based on your input to help us decide what projects fit the mold currently of an ILC program. Some of the cons, anytime you have a rule, it can be a restrictive process. It can cause there to be winners and losers, and maybe there is a better idea out there that we haven't considered. So again, a con is the potential that a rule is restrictive. Another con is not required by legislation but allowed, can add hurdles, and I guess that kind of is tie into the previous one. It's not required by legislation. It's just we are given the authority to have a rule. So and DOT was given that authority, just so that it's clear and understood. Revision process can take some time. That can be a con, but sometimes it's a necessary con. And I can tell you that the colleagues here at the Florida Department of Transportation want to serve the state of Florida and the public as best they possibly can, and would be diligent and prudent in making any necessary changes if that came about. Achieving overall program purpose. Is that a con? Are we missing the mark? That's a possibility. Is there some ILC program applicants out there that should be considered that can't be considered because of the rule? I can't say that there hasn't been. I think to date we have met the intent of the program with the applicants that have been successful. However, in the future there may be some potential applicants that a revision of the rule may make it easier for them to be acceptable. And then meeting the eligibility requirements, that's difficult for some of the stakeholders that we're aware of even have a difficult time meeting some of these requirements. Some of them are stringent and difficult and make the process conform to a certain type of applicant. So we understand that, and we're aware of that. But like has been said earlier, we are open to working with you and finding a way to help you, whether through this program or maybe other types of programs. So with that being said, I just want to continue to encourage all the listeners and attendees to reach out to either your regional district freight coordinators, or reach out to Jasmine, the program administrators, and let us know your pros and cons or your concerns, or how can we better this process. So appreciate you letting me speak to you again. I hope this was helpful, and we look forward to any questions that you may have and potential answers those for you.
Thank you, Jimmy. And just remind everybody, if you have questions for Jimmy or any of our other speakers, you can type them into the question box, and we will get to them at the end of all the presentations. Now I'd like to present our next speaker, Keith Robbins, who is the DOT District 1 Freight Coordinator. Keith?
Good afternoon, everybody. Again, thanks for allowing me to give you a little bit of talk here on what the District Freight Coordinators do for the department and how we can help you in your planning for intermodal logistics centers. Next slide. On this slide, you see the vision and the mission of the freight coordinators. We are a new position in the department. All of us came on board back in July of 2014, and we are here to, as part of the governor's vision, to establish the state as a principal freight, trade, and logistics partner in the world. You can see here that we're the primary district contact on anything dealing with freight and logistics. We assist folks within the department as well as stakeholders within our districts on collaborating on a variety of projects and issues. Multimodal, a key point there is that we are not a single mode of transport expert. We have background and knowledge in all the modes of transportation. We work across the board with public and private entities. We do a lot more with the private industry side than what folks in the department had previously done in the past, where we go out and establish relationships with those stakeholders in our regions. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in just a moment. Key piece in our title, we are coordinators. We do a lot of communication. We facilitate the flow of information. We are not promise makers for the department. We don't have budgetary authority or approval authority on any kind of funding, so it's important for everyone to know that. We understand that first and foremost, so important that you know that when you're talking with us, we are not the decision makers on applications or on project selection. But we do facilitate the flow of information. We can help bring questions or concerns back to the department if you have any. And sometimes we may be able to provide you the answer on scene. As Jasmine mentioned earlier, and I think it was in yesterday's webinars, that we can be the ones that are on the ground to help you in your planning. And again, I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. Next slide. These are the three main goals that the freight coordinators have, or the department has for the freight coordinators. Again, we all come from a background in transportation and logistics. 5 of us came from outside of the department in the private sector world, with dealing with freight forwarding, community and municipal planning, the railroads, military logistics. We even have a professional engineer amongst us. So we've got the background and the knowledge to help you in these things. We are to take, I mentioned the outreach with the private industry and the public entities. Outreach is probably our first and foremost piece of our duty, that we're to go out there and make relationships, establish relationships with the stakeholders in our regions, learn what they're doing, learn how they impact or influence the transportation network in our area, and take any ideas that they may have or concerns that they have and bring those back to the department so that those can be integrated into the day-to-day business of the department and our future planning as well. We help identify, prioritize, and champion certain freight and logistics initiatives within the region that these stakeholders may have, both public and private, and we work that with the department. Community liaisons, traffic ops, design engineers, what have you, the modal developers. We work across the board with all of those folks, and a key catchphrase that we have is to tell the freight story, develop a plan, and sell that story and plan. And that goes both ways, both within the department and outside the department. So we're multidimensional. We have a lot of background knowledge, and we are here to help you in any way that we can. Next slide. In the State Freight Mobility and Trade Plan, or FMTP, these are the 7 primary objectives that were outlined in the strategy element, the policy element of that document last year. If you go online to the Freight Moves Florida website, you can pull up this document and you can see a host of individual strategies for each of these objectives. But 2 of them I wanted to highlight here, number 4 and number 7. Aligning public and private efforts for trade and logistics, and transforming the department's organizational culture to include consideration of supply chain and freight movement issues. Both of those lay squarely in the fold of an ILC operation. So the state recognizes it. Obviously, with this series of webinars, the state is investing a lot of time and energy and funding into the concepts of ILCs and hoping to bring more of them to fruition here in the state. So if you go to the next slide, This gives you a visual of the dollar figure or dollar value of freight project needs that were identified by mode in the current version of the FMTP investment element. Again, these are not all projects, not all these projects are in the work program today. Some of them are, but some of them are not. And some of these may be tied to ILC projects in the future, or at least to concepts and ideas that, because some of the projects here came from the private sector, from the public sector, from those of you that are out there trying to plan one of these in your area. So some of these projects may be tied with what you're working already. Next slide. So we all know what an ILC is and what value it has, but what can the freight coordinators do? I've been touching on it a lot. You know, we bring to the table a fairly extensive set of talents and skills in the freight and logistics industry. We have a focus on a regional orientation of what's happening in our districts with an understanding of the state and national efforts that can synergize into that. We are advisors in the development of our district work program, which means if we find a project that meets the goals and objectives of the FMTP and the guidance laid out by our district secretaries and of course the state, then we can be a champion for that. And it happens to be one that's tied with an ILC project, and we can be a champion for that in trying to bring some of that work into the work program. Again, we're not decision makers, but we can be a champion of certain efforts that could assist in bringing that work to the work program, which takes it one step closer to reality. We're the boots on the ground for the folks in Tallahassee who you apply, make your applications to for ILC grants. We can come out there and be the ones to validate what you're saying in your application. If Tallahassee has a question about it, they can reach out directly to us, and then we can reach out directly to you. You can reach out to us as well if you have questions. And we can come out there, and several of us have already made on-site visits to communities or organizations who have an ILC project in the works, or at least in the planning and conceptual stages. So we can be there to answer questions or to bounce ideas off of with you. And because of that outreach effort that we are all conducting on a daily basis, we have a network of relationships in the industry that may be of value to you. If you're looking for an important partner, or at least another stakeholder that can bring a certain capability to your project, we may know that person, or at least may know that organization, and they may be resident in our district. So we can help put you together with them, make an introduction. Then you talk. What y'all decide to do is entirely on you, but we can at least help facilitate a discussion. Again, we are coordinators, so we can coordinate that flow of information back and forth so that you get answers as best as you can, and hope to help you to put together a complete and accurate application package for your ILC, bring the right players together to make it successful. Because if it's successful in your area, then it should be successful for the state, and that's our ultimate objective, is to make things better for the state. Next slide. These are the contacts across the state. You can see which one of us are in each district. Ricky Fitzgerald is for District 3, the Turnpike, and up in central office in Tallahassee, and as such he acts as the state freight coordinator for all of us. And then there's one of us at each of the district headquarters across the state. We've got our email and phone numbers there. You can reach out to us direct. If you have any questions about anything, we stand by to assist as best we can. So I'll look forward to any questions that you may have at the end of the webinar today. Thank you again for your time, and good luck to you.
Keith, thank you so much. I'm sure that information is going to be very helpful to those who are looking at applying for ILC funding. Our next speaker is Jasmine Raffington, Senior Policy Advisor.
Thank you all for joining us for this session of the webinar. We really appreciate
your participation this afternoon, and for those of you that listened in on the previous session. This, to me, is actually the icing on the cake of why I'm here. As many of you know, I'm new to the program, and as Jimmy mentioned, the program started in the Seaport office, and it was recently moved to ILC Finance Unit, where I'm housed. And we also had some changes recently. We have a new secretary, and I thought that those changes kind of gave us an excellent opportunity to take a look at the program. Certainly on my side, I'm approaching it with an unsocialized mind in that I wasn't involved in the initial setup, so I didn't really have any preconceived notions. But as I started thinking about the program, one of the things that I was looking for is a mechanism that I could reach out to folks like you guys, stakeholders, those that have interacted with the program, have applied and been successful, those that applied and were not successful, others that were thinking about applying and had some general knowledge of how the program operated. And many of the folks that are on that are consultants that work with ILCs. So what I was hoping this presentation would do is kind of invite you guys inside the conversation about how this program should evolve. I know many people don't look at making a lot of changes in a 3-year-old program, but it's actually a very good time to really look at how well we've done what we set out to do. Are there ways that we can improve the process, or perhaps we should redirect and refocus? So what I have here are just essentially some of the things that I was thinking about. The very most important part of this conversation today is to invite you guys in, and I hope that you will all add in suggestions either today that we can try to talk about, and if not, if you need a little bit more time to go back through and think about it, you can submit comments or emails or in whatever format, or pick up the phone. Because one of the things that I know the Secretary wants to do is he wants to serve us to be good servants and to provide our stakeholders with the resources they need. And this program in particular, which is really designed to grow jobs, we want to make sure that you can achieve that goal on behalf of the state of Florida. So help us guide our way to making you successful, which is our success. So the primary goal, as I said yesterday for those that listened, is to grow jobs in our state. The state recognized that ILCs have the potential to be incredible contributors to this goal. A significant part of our current economy is driven by freight and logistics. We want to grow that industry sector. The quality of the jobs and the impact that they have on our communities are significant. And if we are to continue that focus, I guess, you know, where should we go? I have a few thoughts, and these are thoughts. They're not in an action stage yet. I am very, very open to what you guys think. So I'm just going to go through a couple of the suggestions that we've been thinking about, and emphasizing that it's not yet formed. We started with thinking about the ILC forum that had been done the 2 previous years, and we came up with this webinar format as a possible way to make the training opportunity more of an a la carte setup, where when you go to a conference or a 2-day meeting, you're kind of signed on for the entire 2 days or day or however long that is. But when you've got a webinar that's broken down into segments, it gives you an opportunity to look at that agenda to look at your own needs in terms of information, what's being offered, and your schedules and limitations, and decide, okay, I would like to pick, this item, and maybe on the next day another item. So we thought that this was potentially a very good innovation, and we wanted to get some feedback from you guys as to whether or not you thought that was helpful. We're also looking at possibly doing conference calls or other mechanisms to allow us to communicate on a regular basis. I received a phone call from one of the stakeholders, and he suggested maybe trying to broker some regional conversations to allow you to speak to each other. That's something that we're certainly interested in discussing, and of course, in-person meetings over time. So those are some of the ideas in terms of the moving the forum away from what we originally started. And as a part of the in-person meeting, we're also looking at the possibility of maybe doing a more education-oriented conference or offering. So that's one of the things that we'd like to put out there. The other thing that I thought would be something that we could do that would be fairly low cost, and I say that in a state government that's often driven by budget, how much every idea costs, is to try to use this program as a technical assistance tool. We've talked with many of you, and I've talked with some of the proponents of ILCs through my other responsibilities through the department. And many of the people that have been trying to launch these ILCs have reached some technical and structural blockages. And I was thinking that one of the things that we could do was to focus the program on education and technical assistance. So I thought the webinar format, if successful, and the fact that we were going to record it, we would post that up on the web, and I thought, well, this could be the first entry in a ILC program training education library, where we could do future sessions, record them, and post them up, but we could also do topical presentations from experts in areas that you may be interested in. I've already talked with someone about putting together a presentation that we can post on how the department evaluates the return on investment information that you submit, and maybe other subjects. So over time, we can add to these offerings where we would have a library that you could search if you've got a specific question, and or when you have some time, if you're like me, you're eating lunch at your desk, you can browse it and see if there's any information that you can use or learn, or if you've got a change in staff, it could be a resource that you could utilize that way. So I was hoping that we would have, if we have an interest in developing a library, I would be looking to you to help us decide what offerings we should start working on. And we're not going to have this done in the first year or the first 2 years. It's something that we're going to build over time. The other question I think I wanted to throw out there is, by statute, the program is linked to the seaports. It was envisioned as a way of allowing the seaports to move additional freight by moving some of the processing and handling of that freight off of their property into an offsite area so that they can then have more volume. Is there a better way to address this link? One of the issues is, should we consider trying to work with the ports and many of you to talk about the possibility of having, once you've got an operating ILC with an established relationship with a port, is there a way or a benefit to have the ILC and the port be linked through the port master plan? There are some regulatory relief built into Florida statutes for port master plan facilities. And again, I don't know whether or not this is something that we could do and get through the legal hurdles. We may need legislation, but it's a thought that's sort of, brainstorming one of the things that we can do. So whether or not you guys think this is a good idea, one of the questions from yesterday talked about other modes. Should we be looking at projects that perhaps may have a connection to freight moving through an airport and giving them some sort of an opportunity to score well? Currently, the way the statute and the rule are drafted, if that's the only way they have, they would not be eligible. So that's one of the things that we can think about and discuss. The other thing that I wanted to suggest is looking at other ways to kind of establish the ILCs, maybe creating special designations for ILCs. Representative Ray and Senator Ring submitted a bill last year to create freight and logistics zones. The department hasn't officially taken a position on the bill. We're not endorsing it, but the bill basically would designate an area around an ILC as a freight and logistics zone. So that got me thinking, is it a good idea to sort of create a pre-linked designation, let's say, where we would say in statute, or if this is something that you guys think is useful, all ILCs would be considered foreign trade zones or enterprise zones, which would bring to your potential tenants tax benefits and in some cases access to financing. Is there a benefit? Is there an interest? Is that something we should think about? Again, these are ideas that would probably require legislation, and we don't yet know whether or not this is something that would be supported at all levels of the department, but I wanted to throw it out there as thoughts for comment and discussion. The other thing that I wanted to talk or suggest is, how do we improve the linkages between the ILCs and the business development side of Florida that seeks to grow jobs? The system that the Department of Economic Opportunity and Enterprise Florida runs, and the local economic development councils. Those groups are actively trying to recruit businesses, to get those businesses to come to our state, and as a part of that, they're looking at what the various businesses need and to try to identify sites within the state that would meet their needs. Is there a better way for us to have ILCs move to the front of the potential site selection process? So if you've got an established ILC and you've got a company that is in the freight and the logistics business, should we, or is there a benefit to trying to get the economic developers to market those sites first? Or perhaps looking at some of the incentives that the state uses for some of those projects, is there a way, if this is a desirable goal from the stakeholders and the economic development community, maybe we can offer an extra bonus in some of the tax credits if you locate within an ILC? I mean, are there things that we can do to improve that link to help the ILCs be more successful and grow the state's goal, grow more jobs? Because the reason I think it would be very effective is the ILCs, if you've got these shippers in an ILC and the ILCs have the potential to become a part of the strategic intermodal system, it allows the department to concentrate infrastructure resources within a specific location, as opposed to you've got Amazon in one location, you've got Trader Joe's in another. Is there a benefit to try to cement those linkages so that we could make the investments in a more concentrated area so that we can all be successful? And the other thing I wanted to throw out is the freight coordinators. The coordinators are an incredible resource. They are keyed into the other efforts of the department. They are regionalized. They know what's going on in their communities. And what I would like to do, and I've already approached them, is to have them kind of serve as regional program staff and technical assistance hubs. So if you've got an ILC that you're trying to develop, we would like to have them go out and kind of assist you in your first from the ground up planning process. If perhaps you've got one that's already established that may or may not meet funding criteria for this program, to work with you to figure out how do you get to that next step. Maybe you're operating and you're meeting criteria, you want to grow and expand. They can help you identify what resources are available, what are the things that you can do to take that next step. So the other thing that we would like to have them do is to be some of the program feedback loop, because we are government, and one of the key things that we always have to do to continue to get the support from the legislature is to show results. So we have to not only provide, identify projects and give out grants, we have to show that those grants are meeting the intended purpose and the benefit. And the beauty of this program is for a very small investment of infrastructure, we're helping to leverage a lot of private sector dollars that has the potential to significantly affect the area, the region that these ILCs are located. So the coordinators will help us in getting some of that performance data that we can then package and use to get the support that we need to continue and hopefully grow this program. Finally, I guess this is my appeal, that whatever we do, it has to be responsive to what you need. And in order for it to be successful, and we want to have the buy-in at the entry level. And whatever ideas we come up with as staff, we first have to get it through the secretary, and it's always better to say, hey, these are ideas that are coming from our constituents. These are people that have worked with this program. They found a problem here and they think we need to fix it, or they think we didn't quite go far enough. So if you've got some suggestions today, we would really love it to hear from you. That, I guess, is my appeal. If you don't know what you want to say today, think about it, talk to your colleagues, and say the department is soliciting feedback about where to go in the future, and they want us as partners. What do you think we should suggest? And that is my last appeal. If I sound like I'm begging for feedback, I feel like I am begging, because I don't have this all figured out, and I will need your help to make this program more successful than it's been. Thank you very much.
Jasmine, thank you, and I think you're right. I think a partnership is going to make the program successful rather than run from our office here in Tallahassee. So very good. We do hope folks will provide their suggestions and input. We do have a few questions that have come in. A couple for Jasmine right away. Is an infrastructure project required for an ILC? As the program is currently structured legally, yes. Unfortunately, the statute specifies that it has to be a transportation facility, and it keys to an existing definition of statute, which means it has to be the traditional transportation infrastructure. So if this is an issue or a question that we should consider, it would require a statutory change, and that language is, of course, also in the rule because it emanates from statute. So if we were to make that change, it will take time, and we would need to get support first from the Secretary and then the legislature to move forward.
All right. The next question is, will you accept speculative development in the future?
Again, these are things that we're bound by what's in the statute and the rule, and to some degree the intent that the program was supposed to achieve. This program was supposed to take a project that was ready to go and to move it to the next step. So yes, we cannot accept speculative projects currently. I'm not entirely sure how much leeway we will get with a proposal to change that provision, because there's going to be an overwhelming concern both from the Secretary, the Governor, and then the legislature that we are not going to invest public dollars and hope that it's going to generate some benefit where that diminishes the amount of money available for projects that will actually generate jobs. So it's something that we cannot do now. I think it's not something that I think is likely to get a whole lot of forward movement in terms of change. We may be able to stretch what's a ready project, but not eliminate a requirement that you have to have a project.
Since we're on that topic, I'll go on to this one question. How much can the program actually change since it really is in statute already?
Well, see, this is actually something in my wheelhouse. There is no law that cannot be changed. It's just a matter of the time it takes. So the program can change significantly even though it's statute-based. I mean, this program is a very young program, and it was developed with a specific intent, and I know the Secretary and the Governor and the legislature would be interested in a conversation from us and the stakeholders about whether or not the program as it was initially crafted met the goals, or perhaps maybe those goals were not the correct goals. So the program cannot change overnight since it's statute and rule-based, but it still can change, and especially if we've got a good reason to suggest that change.
Do you think there might be increased funds in the future?
The statute now establishes $5 million as the baseline. It doesn't have an upper limit. The amount of money available is based on when the department does its budget planning and it sets up the work program and decide what projects are ready. It allocates an amount to individual programs, but whether or not additional funding will be made available to this program will really be driven by the perceived demand. Do we have enough projects out there to use the available funding, and we're turning away good projects? If we had that, we could argue both first on the budgetary side that this allocation should be, let's say, $10 million or whatever, because for the last 2 years we had all of these projects that we would have awarded if we had the money. So the amount of funding can change. It's currently budgeted at $5, but arguing for that dollar will depend on whether or not we have a way, are able to show that we would use the money if it were given to us.
Okay, great, thanks. We have a couple of data questions. I'm going to toss the first one to Keith, our District 1 Freight Coordinator. Keith, does DOT have freight volume and growth data that's available by state or by district? Keith?
We don't have all of it. I mean, basically, the state did some research into that when they put together the FMTP, but all of the freight coordinators, we were not here when that happened. So one of the follow-on steps in the FMTP, which is the state freight plan, is for us to develop a district-level freight plan. So each of us are doing research within our districts to gather that kind of data at the district level. There are various offices at the state level that have some of that data available as well, but just how much and to what extent, I don't know the full answer to that.
And Keith, this is Jimmy. If I can just follow up on that from the statewide level. Currently, the department doesn't track information on the ILC specifically because they primarily are private entities. However, we do keep track of their location through DOT location projects locations map, and using those facility locations, we do have other studies that have been accomplished by the DOT, like bottleneck studies, capacity studies, and what have you, that could relate to the location and its connectivity to the overall system. So that being said, if there's a question specifically by a stakeholder to this, just reach out to one of us and we'll try and get you the specific answer.
This questioner is asking, do you have any examples of truck-only roads to address ILC congestion in the neighborhoods? Gets that question. Jasmine?
I am going to take it. The I-4 Crosstown Connector is an example of something that we currently have. And the industrial link to, I was going to say industrial link to the port. I'm not sure about that aspect of it, but I know the I-4 Crosstown Connector is an example of a road that alleviates a lot of truck traffic that would address that.
And I think there's some other examples, maybe not specifically related to an ILC at this point in time, but we have developed, like in the Miami tunnel scenario, the tunnel was developed to alleviate truck traffic that goes through a downtown situation. The former situation was a bridge that dumped truck traffic directly into downtown Miami. The new tunnel that the state funded diverts that traffic onto an interstate situation and keeps it going through downtown. So there is examples of projects where we try, and another example would be there's a Highway 98 overpass project in District 3 that is actually bypassing the port. So it's a kind of a reverse project. The traffic was cutting the port off from its rail connectivity and its trucks that are slower pulling out onto traffic. So they did a raised level bridge to alleviate constraints at that facility, which in an end does connect to the Port Panama City IDC, which is one of our ILC projects, through rail and truck. So it does provide a little bit better connectivity to that facility in another means. I guess a secondary answer to that question would be to just, again, reach out to us with specifics on our project, and we'll see how we can make that apply.
It does sound like there are several questions having to do with conflicts. One question is, does the program allow funding for rail mitigation where freight traffic causes conflict, specifically in in urban areas?
That's not something that has specifically come up, but I actually don't know that I think it would be excluded. It's something that I'm assuming they're talking about as a part of the rail mitigation, either quiet zone improvements. As long as it's not the only thing, it's certainly something that we could consider. It's just not something that we've addressed currently. There are other programs in the department that may be able to assist, though. But it's a new question that I don't think is categorically excluded. It just depends on how it's packaged and whether or not it's a part of other improvements. But it's an interesting thought that we should pursue.
Well, here's another. Do you have any examples of truck-only roads to address ILC congestion in neighborhoods?
Again, I really can't think of any, mostly because the ILC development in our state is still fairly new. So a truck-only road with that as its intended purpose, I can't think of anything. But it's certainly something that would not be excluded. If we had an ILC, especially some of these larger planned facilities, and they were to develop at a density that would require that type of infrastructure improvement, it's not something that we would be averse to looking at. I don't know that this program would have the resources to support that, though, but there are other department programs that may be available to assist.
Okay, great. I'm going to toss this question over to Keith. Do you know, are you aware of interactive data on freight flows versus static historic data?
Versus static what data?
Historic.
Historic data? Well, there's a database called TransSearch that we've used in gathering some data that does provide some interesting information on freight flows. But you have to be fairly specific. It's not something that it's actually hosted the questions, or we provide the questions to Tallahassee, and the data guys in central office do the run on the database and then provide that information back to us. So it's a fairly, you have to be specific in what you're looking for in order for them to do the data query in that, and it's something that's, I think it's actually maintained outside the state. I think it's a federal system that's tracking a lot of that. So I know in some of the projects that we've been working on, like on our freight mobility and agribusiness piece, where we've been asking questions about what are the flow in and out of our region by agricultural commodity. We can do that kind of query and get that response back. But is it something that's just sitting resident for somebody to get at any time? Not necessarily. It takes a little bit of time to run that. And I'm not sure what the latest date on that is. I think it's at least through 2013, though.
Hey, Keith, thanks so much. I got a question for Jimmy here. Are gate appointments being used to alleviate truck traffic congestion and bottlenecks?
And that's a good question, and we appreciate that question. Currently, you know, I'm aware of several private entities that use this type of technology to improve their gate times, and I believe the technology is to be able to reach out to the long-haul truckers and shippers, as well as the shippers that are doing the short haul from a port facility to maybe an ILC or what have you, and to prevent congestion on the roadways in and out of the gate processing areas, that you would be able to queue them and prepare them for entry. I can tell you the DOT is working with several vendors and exploring this opportunity. Currently, none of our ILCs that I'm aware of are implementing this that have received funding. Some of our ports have their own type of system that they implement to help with security processing and alleviate stress at their gates. However, there is not an overall statewide system in place currently to date, but DOT is looking at the options and exploring those types of technologies currently.
All right, a couple general questions. I think these are for Jasmine. I'm going to lump two questions together. What changes do you think the Secretary is going to want for the program, and then what is his vision for ILC funding?
I know the Secretary is very, very committed to this notion of using the department as a tool for growing jobs. He shares former Secretary Prasad's view that the Department of Transportation is Florida's largest economic development agency, and this is one of the programs that we have that were at its inception was really branded for that purpose. It's trying to grow jobs. So I know that this is something that he wants to continue. Whether or not he has any specific ideas on changes he would like to make, I don't know that he does. I think that what he is open to is looking at what the needs of our stakeholders are and trying to determine if we're not meeting those needs, what's the best way to do so. So I think that he is open to the process of making changes without having anything specific in mind, because he hasn't suggested anything.
He's pretty new, too. He's got a lot.
But he had the benefit of having been here as chief of staff, where he was very actively involved in the operation of the agency and policy development under the previous secretary. So it's an asset that he really does know how a lot of these programs work.
Absolutely. I think this may be our last question. I'm not sure. Do you meet with prospective businesses, and how can that be arranged?
We don't meet with prospective businesses. If you've got a business that is looking at coming to our state or has an interest in a specific ILC, we would not, DOT, meet with that business because we are not really covered under the public records exemptions that would allow us to keep that conversation closed. If we had a business that was interested, we would probably refer them to Enterprise Florida that could work with them to identify the details of what they would need, what resources, if anything, the state would have to provide to assist them to identify a site. And that entire conversation would be exempted from disclosure under Florida Public Records Law. So if someone called us, we would refer them to EFI, and that way we could have a very candid, detailed conversation, determine if the business would be able to deliver on whatever commitments they're trying to make in order to get state interest and support without any threat that important negotiations may become public.
Thank you, Jasmine. We did get one more question. Apparently historic issue with ILC locations. How is regional land use being incorporated into the process? So, Jimmy, you want that one?
Yeah, I can mention a couple of brief examples, and then I'll let Jasmine kind of close it out. A good example that we've had, I would say, is in two of the ILCs. First of all, the Port Manatee Commerce Center is an ILC that's outside of the port facility, the Port Manatee facility, and it's incorporated into the county, Manatee County specifically, what they call their encouragement zone. And they basically used county zoning to develop a commercial land use and industrial land use zone. They also provided tax incentives to people who locate within that zone. So that was an example where there was a good crossover, and that an ILC was able to marry with a local entity to get identified land uses and to get some incentive-based programming involved. Another example is Port Panama City using their IDC. The city actually owns the property. They're able to help with developing the property, getting that prepared for use, also in zoning the property. But they were able to help with the funding as well, the matching funds and what have you through their city programs and through the Port Authority. So those are two examples where local government was able to help out. I think Jasmine can maybe share some of the ideas of, in the future, how we can better connect the dots, I'd say.
One of the things that the department has been doing is been working with on communities that are developing regional visions on how they're going to grow into the future. And as a part of that regional visioning process is to identify what are the infrastructure needs and things that we're going to need to do as this, a transportation agency so that that vision can come to fruition. As a part of that process and those discussions, industrial uses like ILCs are a part of the conversation, and it's something that we can certainly take a more formalized approach to. And as you all know, all Florida communities have comprehensive plans. And as a part of that planning process, they have future land use elements, as well as industrial overlays as to where they're going to site these types of facilities. So those things can work together as a part of a regional vision, so that as we plan our investments, we know where the likely use points will be. We don't currently have a specific protocol for including ILCs, but it's certainly something that we should be looking at in the future.
Great, thank you, Jasmine. I would just want to say that this webinar wins in terms of the number of questions that were asked. This is the most engaged group of attendees, so give yourself a hand, even if you're by yourself in your office. As I said at the beginning of the webinar, the session has been recorded, and we hope to have the recordings of all 6 webinars up hopefully by the end of the week. So if you know people who weren't able to attend, let them know that, or if you want to go back and listen to the recordings, you can do that yourself. You'll receive a very brief survey at the end of the webinar asking your thoughts about it, and we hope you'll respond to that. If you want to take part in the webinars tomorrow, make sure you register at freightmovesflorida.com and then click on the ILC tab. Our sessions tomorrow, we will talk about ILC development in the morning at 10 o'clock, and at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, we'll talk about site selection. And make sure that you send in any suggestions that you have to Jasmine. She's anxiously waiting for them. Anyway, thanks all of you. Thanks to our speakers, and everybody have a great afternoon.